So this is our first, I don't know if I call it an alpha beta test or maybe the first official podcast of Free Thinkers Anonymous. That is the title that co-host Jeremy came up with. Yeah, this would be Mike. And then we also have our other, maybe recurring, we don't know yet, um, partner in this. We got Donald.
Thank you.
So let's get to it, guys. I figured we start with something light, ease into everything. I thought let's talk about social media. What are your thoughts on social media, Jeremy?
My thoughts on social media. Well, it's uh it's got its pluses and minuses for sure. I will say probably significantly more minuses than pluses. Outside of the typical, people are much less likely to communicate in public because they are worried about what might be recorded of them while they're out in public that might be posted to social media and then they get put on blast. Well, because they said one thing wrong at one time and then that surfaces years later, they lose their job. I mean, there's definitely a general feeling out in the world that you can't do things without thinking very carefully about the way that they'll be perceived even years down the road. I mean, there was a brief period of time where I feel like people were kind of letting their guard down. People were communicating in a much more positive way in general, and then social media kicked off in the early 2000s, and for a little while everybody was super happy about it, and it was a nice way to keep in touch with people that you might have otherwise lost touch with. And then that shifted over time to now it's about metrics. I don't know, this is something you briefly mentioned with podcasts in general, which is just another form of social media in a way, but it's about metrics, how many people you reach. And particularly now that we're in the age of influencers, where influencers make money based on how many people they can get to follow them. So they'll say more inflammatory things. They'll create a situation that's more dangerous in the real world so that get people to either be upset with them or be happy with them. Sometimes it's both, so that they get the metrics, they get the followers, they get the reactions. And as long as they get that, then they are going to continue to get money from different companies looking to use them as marketing tools. That's a trend that doesn't seem likely to stop anytime soon, as long as social media companies don't have any interest in stopping it, which I'm sure they don't because it's free money for them too. But then we also have the globalization of ideas, which was a much more minor thing back in the early 2000s because it was all chat rooms and whatnot until around 2004, 2005, when Facebook really started to take off. Because even with MySpace, there wasn't really much globalization of ideas. It was just people posting little thoughts and whatnot. But as Facebook groups became a thing, as the public pages became a thing, and then as Reddit exploded and 4chan exploded and different Discord groups and everything else, it's to the point where you can almost guaranteed find somebody who agrees with you. You don't even have to look that hard anymore. So it's very, very easy to create echo chambers, which is something that humans are naturally inclined to do anyway, because people like to hear people who think the same way that they do, that agree with them, because that's a much more copacetic, friendly environment that you're going to be in. But in real life, when you're walking and talking around with actual people, that makes sense. Like, you want to spend time with people that can support you, people that generally want the same things as you. But when you get to social media, you're not getting one or two people that happen to live in your neighborhood. You're not getting one or two people that happen to work with you. You're getting thousands to tens of thousands of people that have a very similar outlook on life, that are willing to echo back every idea that you have. And it is extremely unlikely you're going to be challenged with your belief system, which that inherently creates a very fanatical approach to considering life in general, which just makes things worse because everybody is just repeating the same thing over and over again. Nobody is contradicting anyone with anything they put out, whether there's any basis in reality or not. And then you get to the other group, whatever the other group may be, and now that other group is othered. That other group is the enemy. That other group is the ones that don't understand things. And you have thousands of people that are willing to tell you, you understand things. It's the other people that don't. And they all just piggyback on each other to the point where there's very little critical thinking anymore. That's kind of why I like the name Free Thinkers Anonymous, because it's important for me that anybody we bring on the podcast to have their own thoughts, to have researched the things that they want to discuss, and that they're not echoing back our ideas at us. They are informed and they have opinions that are informed opinions. They're not opinions based on what they've been told by social media or marketing campaigns or whatever individual news source is their cup of tea. Anyway, that was a trend. So what are your guys' thoughts?
Going based off what you're saying about just like the growth of social media, you did a great job, by the way, of basically breaking down the history of it, which is kind of interesting where we're at now, right? Obviously, yesterday, LA Times announces the layoffs, probably the biggest layoffs, I think, of the company from what I read, 115 people. And it's, it was basically like probably the biggest LA news organization there was, right? And it got me thinking about just everything in the media that's happened the past year, from like Pitchfork being gone and going into GQ, and just a bunch of layoffs that are happening across the board from different media companies, and a lot of consolidation happening. And it's funny because social media is kind of like another version of the media, and I feel like social media kind of indirectly affected stuff like this because of the fact, like to your point, we live in a time where influencers, the things that people talk about is like something that an influencer says. If an influencer posts about a certain shoe, about anything, product, service, people talk about it, right? Ozempic became a thing, right, towards the end of last year, because all of a sudden it was a thing that celebrities were losing weight through medication that's meant for diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And then that became something that invaded the news cycle. And then in social media, definitely was talking about it. And I feel like it's kind of interesting to see something like social media become such an influential thing in our society now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a bummer to see these legacy media companies like Sports Illustrated shutting down and all that, like just kind of going away because people would rather get their information and news through someone doing a TikTok video and get that 60-second fast food version of whatever is happening in the world.
Yeah.
And I think some of it, like we were talking about earlier, some of it is useful. Like when it comes to like, under coverage of things with Israel Palestine, if there's a lot of things not being informed enough, it does help to have citizen journalists out there. But there are certain things where it does feel like you have to kind of go through a credible source and really do a lot of research before you think what's good or not, and I think that social media has definitely contributed in this fashion. For example, Mark Zuckerberg, he made Facebook, and he's hated a lot for being this kind of social media guy that people claim to hate and think like, oh, he's like the worst person in the world, but yet he's like the king of it. You know what I mean? Like, such a weird way of looking at our society's way of seeing that.
That's a really good point. One of the things that I think is such a bizarre disconnect in particularly in American culture, but in cultures across the world, is that there is no correlation in so many people's mind between the things that they do and the things that they like or don't like. And by that I mean there's people that think that J.K. Rowling's opinions on trans issues is appalling, but they'll still buy Harry Potter Legacy, the new game that came out. But that money is going directly into her pocket. And it's the same thing with TikTok. They're like, oh, well, we don't like the Chinese government, but we're going to give them literally all of our information and let them choose what is fed into our eyeballs and into our ears for probably a good hour to 2 hours every single day. And we hate Mark Zuckerberg. He's a terrible person, but also we're going to be on social media for probably a good hour to 2 hours almost every single day using his tool and scrolling through ads that he gets paid to place in front of us. He's making money off of us using his website, and yet we still use his website while we say we don't like him. It's the same or a very similar thing that happened with Trump, where everybody's like, we hate Trump, we hate Trump. But then all they would ever talk about is Trump. And I'm like, if you actually hate Trump, focus on something else. Because talking about someone, talking about a thing is free marketing. The more you discuss that thing, the more you bring up that thing, the more you use that thing, whatever it is, you're putting your energy into it, and it's translating to other people having this thing put in front of them even more. So back to your main point with Mark Zuckerberg and even Elon Musk with Twitter, there's so many people that claim to be so against what these people are doing, but they still use what these people are doing. And to a degree, I understand the difficulty with social media because it's very difficult to have a wide reaching audience without utilizing one of those tools. So it's one of those like, either get in line or shut up and go away. And there is a balance between those two.
No, it's true. I get what you're saying. I feel like mainstream media, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, I mean, as much as they hated the guy, they can't complain that the ratings were great. And the minute that dude's gone, the ratings are down. And then layoffs are starting to happen. And it's this whole thing where it's
Mhm.
like, you said you don't like this guy, but yet without saying it indirectly, you kind of miss him because with with Biden, you're not getting any news like that. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's such a weird thing, you know?
I was going to say the sad thing too is that that's not what news media used to be. News media in the 80s, in the 90s, it was doing interviews with world leaders. It was looking into problems that are plaguing our country and plaguing our world, looking into the more nuanced situations that are happening in the Middle East. Nowadays, what you get is, in my opinion, even worse than TikTok videos because they're generally not much more informed than those. I've actually seen multiple news sources that have used TikTok videos as their source. And I mean, you look at like David Muir, for instance, and he's a regular broadcast news reporter where he will bring up the subject matter at least 4 times throughout the 30-minute episode. And he says one sentence about it. And then when it comes time for the actual story, he'll add 2 more sentences after repeating the sentence that he already had. And that's it. That's the entire news story. It's a combined 20 seconds, maybe. It would have been faster just to watch a TikTok video than it would to watch the news. And he's not saying anything worth listening to. He's not saying anything where you can actually make an informed decision based off of the information that he gives you. It's just you have the headline and maybe the byline. You don't have the article, you don't have the story. This is a subject you should pay attention to. And that's about all he ever gives you. And it's frustrating because he's probably one of the best news anchors on TV right now. But that's news nowadays. News is not much more than TikTok videos. And I think that's why they're going by the wayside because they're trying to compete with TikTok videos that don't have production costs. And the news media has to verify their sources. They have to make sure that what they're saying is at least mostly accurate, that it's up to date, that it's current, that they manage the team, that they broadcast correctly. Like there's a lot of production costs that go into that. And instead of realize, hey, we have a lot of infrastructure that makes us who we are, we need to use that infrastructure to make things better, to make people more informed. Instead, they're like, hey, how can we get to the lowest common denominator? Because that pulls views and views make money. And that's all they're looking for right now. If they had have maintained the focus on deeper stories, I think, and maybe done quick little segments where they could do that TikTok video, YouTube video, quality news stories. Have a 5-10 minute segment where it's just rapid fire. Here's all the things you need to know. And then do one 20-minute segment where they get into an interview with somebody or really dive deep into a subject matter that is drastically affecting people in this country. That's one of the things that I'm so excited that Jon Stewart's coming back to The Daily Show, and John Oliver is another really good anchor that does that type of thing where he has the quick little 5 minute TikTok quality stories, and then he moves on to a big thing, a thing that people aren't necessarily paying attention to. And he dives in fairly deep for the amount of time that he has and kind of sums up the whole thing in a way that's easy to understand. And I'd say at least half the time, it's not even something that's politically driven. It's just like, hey, older people are having their rights taken away by random strangers that find a way to basically take authority of their own bodies away from them, and they're stealing their inheritance in the process. This is a thing that's happening in this country. And nobody would know about that if not for John Oliver and Last Week Tonight. But that's something that the major news stations are not doing anymore. Major news stations could care less about the real stories. They only care about the hot button topics, the quick little tidbits, interviewing the same politicians over and over and over again, which I don't even understand why. They were interviewing Tim Scott about how Trump made racist remarks about Nikki Haley. And I'm like, why does this matter? Like, Tim Scott's perspective on Trump's racist comments about Nikki Haley is not news. Tim Scott's a nobody at this point, and there's no reason to give him any screen time. If you care about Nikki Haley's perspective on what Trump said about her, we could interview her directly. If you cared about what Trump meant to say or what his thoughts were on that, you could interview him. Otherwise, what's the point in bringing this up? We're literally just focusing on a tidbit that Trump probably had as a throwaway line. He probably didn't even understand what he was saying based on a bunch of his rallies and what he's been saying in those. I mean, the words don't even connect into coherent sentences, regardless of what he's trying to say with those sentences together. So why are we spending time on this? Why are we giving screen time to politicians that don't matter about subject matters that don't matter when there's so much to talk about that really does matter? That if people had enough attention put toward, that we could actually start doing something in this country to make it better.
Yeah, with the whole advent of social media, the one term that became widely used was things have to go viral, right? And this whole thing of how can we put out this concept and topic that's really going to get views? And I think part of it too is which is the irony, right? Of like when people have these TikTok personality or YouTubers that they follow, these influencers, it's because they're very trusted, right? There's something about them that for some reason came across as more genuine and real to, I guess, stems almost from celebrity culture, right? How people idolize and really look to follow and, or emulate somebody. You could be one of them kind of a thing. You know, you could pick up your phone, start recording yourself, and you too could have a channel. You too could blow up. And you also will be someone that everyone's going to have thousands, if not millions of followers. The whole thing of kind of going viral is such a weird concept to me. You're almost learning how to market yourself. Start out from a movement of wanting to move away from something that felt very corporate, very controlled, very much big money influence. And then people discover for themselves, hey, if I do the same thing, I can emulate the same kind of culture and have the same kind of impact as a news station. It's unfortunate that we have these news stations now that try to copy a system which they themselves created, you know? It does come down to market share and being able to impact as many people without really saying much or really having a really positive impact.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of celebrity worship is such a big thing because you see it with anybody that people can see in front of them, which originally was celebrity worship in the form of sports stars and actors and potentially politicians, where people just felt like these people could do no wrong if they were somebody that fit a certain mold or a certain idea that they had of who that person was. And nowadays that's expanded to influencers, and influencers can quite easily disappear without any warning because there's nothing that they do. Like, influencers' job is literally just to get people to like them and to follow them and to believe them. So there's no reason financially or socially for them to not do everything they possibly can to get people to like them and believe them and buy the things that they tell them to buy. So, Donald, I don't know if you know, but I have an 11-year-old daughter and I have a 4-year-old son. And my 11-year-old daughter, for Christmas, she wanted makeup products,
Mm.
which is fine. It's not the end of the world. We got her a lot of the products that she asked for, but I did tell her very clearly because she said she loved these products. And I said, "When did you use these products before?" And she said, "Well, I haven't, but I saw so and so using them on YouTube." And she follows a whole bunch of different YouTube accounts that also have mirrored TikTok accounts. It's basically TikTok just on YouTube. Her friends start following them, and because she's friends with her friends, then she ends up getting them put in front of her, and then her friends start talking about them, so she follows them. And it's this, like, the algorithm is choosing what even kids nowadays want to buy. It's choosing how quickly they're growing up. It's choosing, like, everything about their lives, which is why I've been trying to keep the kids off of social media as much as possible. But particularly with YouTube, there are good things on there as well. There are informative things on there. So I kind of push her to lean toward the more informative things. But that said, there is going to be marketing that happens to people all the time, regardless. So it's something that she needs to be aware of. And particularly when it comes to hero worship, when hero worship or celebrity worship, where you do just trust that this person is being honest, that this product works as good as they say it does. And they might say, "Oh, this is a really luxury item." So all of a sudden they can charge a lot more for that item, regardless of whether or not it's an actually really high quality item. And it creates this idea that if you can get the right influencer to market your product, all of a sudden you can get people to buy your product. It's very much classic marketing. I mean, people used to do this back in the day by, and just look at Shaquille O'Neal selling Icy Hot. I mean, it's not something that's new. It's something that's a lot easier for people to get hooked to because, unlike sports where you have a set number of players on a set number of teams and you know exactly who's good and who's not, and you know whose face you've seen a lot more than others, or actors, you've watched certain movies, there's certain actors you know, certain actors you've seen for a long time that you're more likely to trust because the characters that they played in some of the movies or shows they were in were trustworthy people. Nowadays, you get influencers that they get to present however they want, which is generally as trustworthy as possible. So they're used car salesmen selling everything. They're not just selling used cars. And they don't even have to sell you the product. They literally just have to pretend to sell you the product and people will pay them. And then you buy the product and that product has nothing to do with them. So no matter what they put forward, no matter whether or not it's a complete scam, they don't look into it. And if you buy it, you can't go after them, even though they're the reason that you bought it. So they can just keep doing scam after scam after scam. And unless the people following them have enough of a cry saying, "Hey, you are taking advantage of your followers," it takes a really long time before you can even begin to shut down an influencer nowadays. Unless, of course, they say something slightly racist, then you can put them on blast and they disappear almost immediately. Like, it's such a bizarre world that we live in where real harm is irrelevant and superficial harm and personal perspective and opinion is grounds for execution. Like, It's extreme nowadays where political correctness is the new law and the law is irrelevant.
Oh, dude, political correctness is so wild, man. I remember when it became trendy, you gotta put up a black square. Now you gotta put up a blue square. You gotta support with the rainbow. And it's just changing an icon on your profile. You're not really doing anything. And I think that's why I was always firmly against it. And people used to get on my case. You don't support these causes because you're not changing your profile color. And I'm thinking, but what are you actually doing? What are you trying to accomplish? What is the meaning and purpose of this? Instead of it just following the trend. I mean, if you follow the trend, then you're a good person. No, that's contributing positively to your community, to your society, to your country. And it's very interesting to see how things make you feel becomes the central talking point. We do want to present people with some level of information, some level, there's something to it, right? It's not just we feel a certain way about something, but has become the main talking point about how these things make you feel. You mentioned echo chambers and talking to other people that share the same views you do. A lot of that is contributing to people wanting to be feeling good all the time. I think that's what social media taps into and has been proven. There's a certain level of dopamine hit that you have when you're clicking on things that you like, clicking on things that make you feel good, and talking about being PC, whole safe space conversation. I think that's something that has all kind of developed around the same time. And why we're also seeing this side effect of higher levels of anxiety and depression amongst people as well. I think in chasing this kind of a high, social media is a drug in a sense of how people are coming back for it, looking for engaging. You're chasing these likes. But these likes are from complete strangers who don't really know you, who don't have a true invested interest in you. Yeah, this is where our focus is socially.
Yeah, it's how we communicate now. I see so many kids, they're used to the FaceTime effect. Like they don't feel weird about walking around with the phone in their hand as they're talking to their friend and actually seeing them. I still trip out having to do FaceTime. I'm like, because I'm on meeting, I was like, oh man, like I'm not ready to be seen on camera. Like it's kind of weird and it's random. You know what I mean? It's probably like my mom or something. You know what I mean? It's like I shouldn't feel that way, but it kind of still does because I'm from a generation where like I'm okay with the phone call. I don't have to physically see your face, you know what I mean? But I do get what I see kids do the FaceTime. It's so natural to them, it's so normal. And I think that is just one of the things. I'm gonna say quickly to Jeremy's point about marketing. I think one of the things that I for sure remember learning when I was in college was that everything in life is marketing. And even if it meant you didn't know it, but everything has a brand. It's crazy to think that these influencers became as big as they are. And it's interesting to me that the word that they chose or the word that we kind of came for the term that we use is the word influencer. I don't know what other term we could use that wouldn't be such a fitting term for what they do. They don't do anything but influence people. And I think that it's interesting because like even for me, I learned that everything in life is marketing, meaning like anything that you say in conversation is promoting something, whether you think of it or not, right? Like if you were to wake up and you say, hey, like you want to grab McDonald's for breakfast, it's like, yeah, let's go grab McDonald's. Yeah, you already promoted McDonald's without thinking that you did it. You know what I mean? Because you're just thinking about having breakfast. You hop in your car, I drive a Honda, and it's like, oh, yeah, I just promoted Honda right now because that's the car that I drive. It's like when people see you all doing your workout and you're wearing whatever workout clothes, they all have a logo on it, whether it's the Nike swoosh or whatever shoes you're wearing, Adidas or whatever. It's like you're branding yourself, and there's a marketing aspect to it. If you have really nice shoes and they're Adidas shoes and people like them, they already see what brand they are, so they already know where to go to get them if they wanted them. It's kind of hard to escape it, man. Even right now, we're on a Zoom call. Someone says, "Hey, what were you doing last night?" "Oh, I recording a podcast with my buddies over Zoom." "Oh, you could do that?" "I didn't know you could do that." "Yeah." And then now they're gonna think, "Oh man, if I want to start a pod with my friends online, maybe I could download Zoom and now I could do that too." You know what I mean? I didn't promote Zoom. It just happened to be part of the convo. It's like, how do I say anything without saying a brand or something in regards to it? It's hard. That's just the world that we live in. And I think it's just becoming more and more apparent when you see celebrities promote things. And I think that's where it gets kind of gray, because you're so trusting of everything and how things are being advertised to you that you just trust the ad. But to Jeremy's point, not everything is 100% the best. Like celebrities do just take the whatever fee they get for their endorsement and they do it. And they don't really care whether they're on the back end if it's a good product or not. It's not their problem. That's just how they think, and it's crazy. It's like I was telling Mike, like Snoop was paid to do that smokeless commercial thing, and then I was reading that they let go of the
Hmm.
CEO because it turned out that it didn't convert to any sales for the actual product. So, it was just a bad bet,
Yeah,
and but I'm sure Snoop doesn't care because he got his fee. So it's just crazy how that works. Because again, I think all of this has to contribute to the economics and how things are done. To Jeremy's point, like, does make sense if we were to talk about infrastructure, or we were to talk about maybe the job market or how things can be done better within the job market and things like that. Because I think those are the more conversations that actually push society forward. But yet, we're so distracted by all this other stuff in the news cycle, on social media. There's just so much distraction out there. There's way more distraction is actually like good food to consume in terms of
yeah.
information.
No,
But yeah.
I agree. I think there's there's a lot of consumption that's happening and very little production. And the production that is happening is very low quality. I mean, Donald, you were talking about podcasts. Like, there's so many podcasts out there that are just people chatting and recording their conversations and then sending it out to the world because they think everybody needs to hear their opinions. And when that's not an informed opinion, I don't know why it's worth listening
Exactly.
to. that's that's kind of the crucial thing, is like, if it's not informed, you probably don't need to be talking, because you're not contributing to society with that conversation. Like with this conversation here, I very intentionally try to stay informed on subjects before I communicate about them. So if I don't know enough about a conversation, like if I don't know significantly more than the layman about a topic, I'm not going to discuss it. I'll straight up say, like, my dad, for instance, he follows politics very closely, and he'll try to bring up stuff that happened with Biden. And I'm like, I don't tell him, like, no, that didn't happen. I don't tell him, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe Biden did that. I just tell him, I haven't heard enough about that. So I'll have to look into that. But it's interesting to know that that's a news story. I'm not saying that happened. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying I didn't know anything about that until now, and I need to look into that before I say anything about it, because not having that perspective in general, I think, is probably going to continue taking society to the least common denominator. And I think it's something that would be great if people could avoid. If people could just keep their mouths quiet when they don't have an informed opinion to discuss. And I know a lot of people feel like they have informed opinions if they just have an opinion, but there is merit to informed opinions, and there is merit to expert opinions, which is even beyond informed opinions. And I think people thinking that their opinions are equally valid simply because they have one is one of the insanities of modern culture. But with that said, I'm gonna have to dip out because it is getting a little bit late here. But you guys keep going. Thank you, Donald, for chatting with us, and I will join you guys again next time. But we definitely need to set up a time to keep going.
For sure, man. I should hop off too. I gotta do some stuff. I just looked at the clock too, and I'm just like, oh shoot,
Okay.
it's about to be 8 o'clock here in LA, and I was like, I gotta do some stuff before I go to bed. So
Well, I think that we're going to leave it there for tonight. Thanks, Jeremy, for joining us. Thanks, Donald. And hope you guys tune in for the next one.